The UN's flagship economic report finds that the world economy is projected to shrink sharply by 3.2% this year due to the impact of the coronavirus pandemic, exacerbating poverty and inequality. The World Economic Situation Prospects Report estimates that the global economy will lose nearly $8.5 trillion in output over the next 2 years, wiping out nearly all the gains of the previous 4 years, causing an estimated 34 million people to fall below the extreme poverty line in 2020, with 56% of this increase occurring in African countries. U.S. Correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease spoke via Zoom with the UN's chief economist and began by asking him what the implications were of the report's dire projections.
I think we are facing a fundamental structural shift in the way our global economy works. For one thing, we have seen the degree of interconnectedness and how rapidly we are infected, if you will, by problems that are going on in any one place through the trade channels. And we've always known that we stand strong or fall apart together, but we were, I think, somewhat surprised at how rapidly these shocks were transmitted across countries. We've also seen, I think, how interconnected individual sectors are, that to the extent that we have a problem in the economy of a developed country, that the change in their demand structures can immediately have an impact on the tourism sector in a small island developing state on the other end of the world. And I think that has driven home more than any other factor in the last 30 years, the degree to which we all depend upon each other. Now, we've also seen as well that this crisis, although it affects us all differently. And there are many of us, for example, you and I, we're sitting here conducting our normal work online, but there are hundreds of millions of other people who cannot earn a wage unless they go out and execute their activities in close proximity to others, which means they're much more exposed to the damage of the crisis, and they may not be able to earn a living because their clients are not there because of the shutdown, the economic restrictions. And what that underscores more than, I think, any other phenomenon in the last 30 years is how deeply unequal our societies actually are. And we face a real problem, I think, even after the recovery starts, that some will have fallen even further behind, some countries, and even more important, some groups of people within countries. And we need to be sure in crafting our recovery approaches that we keep that in mind, that we try
Let's talk a bit about that. Let me jump in here. The pandemic will likely cause, according to this report, an estimated 34.3 million people to fall below the extreme poverty line in this year alone, 56% of this increase occurring in African countries. An additional 130 million people may join the ranks of people living in extreme poverty by 2030. Is this pandemic an existential threat to the UN's development agenda, particularly the SDGs?
It is a threat. Whether it's an existential threat depends on the nature of the recovery. As the Secretary General pointed out from the very beginning, it's also an opportunity. We had been lagging behind with regard to some of the Sustainable Development Goals. We have an opportunity now to direct our recovery in ways that allow us to catch up lost ground. Yeah? Now, for example, we know that some of the measures that have been put in place, the emergency measures, have dealt with providing social protection to workers who have been directly affected by the crisis. That is a resilience-building measure, and we consider that that would be something that governments should build into the very fabric of their societies as a permanent fixture of their policy frameworks. This means that their societies have a greater degree of resilience going forward, are less subject to shocks in the future, and consequently less likely to fall off the pathway towards sustainable development should something untoward happen in the future. But by the same token, we understand that this is an opportunity as well to shape a more green and more sustainable type of economy. We have a lot of people who've lost jobs because of this crisis. We can direct our investments towards sustainable projects that might create what we call in the UN green jobs, decent work that can then provide a sustainable livelihood for people going forward.